This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, market sentiment was pretty fragile today as a rout in tech stocks extended on Wall Street. MSCI's index of emerging market stocks hit a 5-week low and extended losses to a sixth straight session, which of course is the longest such streak since late January. However, South Africa's JSE went along with European markets today. Investors seem to shrug off concerns over tech stock losses and, of course, the COVID-19 vaccine setback. In fact, analysts there are saying that investors see the latest downturn as a healthy correction after several of the tech giants reached staggering heights. Now, also coming up on today's show. Digital fraud on the rise as more people turn to online transactions. Farmlands swept as floods ravage Nigeria. And young people in Ghana find opportunities in farming as the coronavirus impacts white-collar jobs. Well, Africa is increasingly going digital, with COVID-19 fueling that transformation. The downside is that it has potentially further exposed users to digital theft and cyber hacks. Well, communication solutions provider Liquid Telecom says cybersecurity has become a real and imminent threat to businesses and their end users. A survey conducted by the firm in August found that 57% of IT decision makers in Kenya and South Africa have seen an increase in threats over the pandemic period. 83% of them are now have an increased focus on cybersecurity this year. Now, in order to mitigate cyber threats, over 60% of these businesses say that they've put in firewalls and email protection. Well, let's get more on this survey from David Baer. He's the Chief Digital Officer at Liquid Telecom. Great to have you on the show with us, Mr. Baer. Now, over half of the survey respondents have experienced a cybersecurity threat over the pandemic period, as we heard there. What exactly did that survey reveal about the level of risk to businesses and end users since COVID-19? And of course, what are their biggest concerns?
Thank you very much. Yes, so we did a survey of decision makers in the IT space across enterprises of South Africa and Kenya, and we discovered that there was a significant increase in attacks during the COVID period, caused because a number of people obviously are working from home, working remotely, and are therefore accessing their corporate data across insecure networks and in situations that are not designed ideally for such environments. Now, what we found was that the increase in phishing attacks, in compromised passwords, led to a number of breaches. I think we've seen a number of reports across the countries where we've seen this increase. And this has really led to having to come up with new ways of combating these threats as we go in.
Well, what
we are now seeing, sorry.
Go ahead.
We're seeing over 50% of enterprise data being stored in the cloud. That's being accessible not only to employees, but to customers and other partners. And securing that has become a full-time focus area. And traditional methods used to do that security is not often ideal or optimized for a cloud-first, mobile-first world.
Well, what did the survey then reveal about what businesses are doing to mitigate those threats, especially in terms of allocating budgets to manage cybersecurity in their companies?
Well, we've seen an increase in budget allocation for cybersecurity, often as a result of reduced budgets of on-prem solutions, because obviously people are working more remotely. We've seen people installing firewalls, VPNs, anti-phishing systems for mail systems, etc. But there are a bunch of new solutions that we are bringing out to the market now, where we make much more effort in stopping the attacks before they happen by training the staff and by making your employees the instead of being a attack surface for these threats, making them into part of your security solution.
Now, of course, Liquid Telecom is trying to be part of the solution. You're actually unveiling a new cybersecurity unit, which you say will revolutionize how cybersecurity is approached. Tell us a little bit more about this plan.
Okay, great. So obviously, Liquid Telecom has been, for the last 15 years, building Africa's digital future. And we've built significant high-speed fiber networks across Africa. Now, the positive of that, of course, is that we have better connectivity. People can access their data better than ever before, but equally so can the malicious actors. And so as the connectivity improves, we get global attacks focused on Africa because they now have the ability to do that at high speed. Therefore, Liquid Telecom is unveiling this new cybersecurity business unit, which is going to be focused on combating this problem. We've had a lot of customers come to us and ask for these solutions in the last year. Now, we believe that if you combine the network, cloud, and cybersecurity under one umbrella, you get a far superior solution. It reduces the complexity, therefore reduces the risk, and also reduces the cost by bringing those three components together, because you can take telemetry data from the different aspects of your business and look at it overall from a high-level view, rather than seeing a bunch of disjointed systems. So by bringing it all together, we really give a much neater, more comprehensive solution.
Well, we do have to leave it there, but many thanks, Mr. Bear, for your insights. That was David Bear. He is the Chief Digital Officer at Liquid Telecom. Well, let's stay on the topic of cybersecurity. Kenya has emerged as one of the continent's easiest targets for cyber attacks. That's according to Kaspersky, which is of course, a multinational cybersecurity and antivirus provider. Now, the firm did reveal that Kenya accounted for over 1 out of every 4 of the 2 million online attacks in Africa. In its second quarter report, the cybersecurity firm reported that Kenya had more than 500,000 phishing attacks, coming in second to South Africa, which had just over 600,000 spam and phishing attacks. Now, of course, Egypt faced just below 500,000 attacks, while Nigeria recorded almost 300,000 attacks. Kenya's East African neighbors, Rwanda and Ethiopia, are faring much better. They accounted for just under 69,000 and above 31,000, respectively. Now, of course, Kaspersky says that small companies were the largest targets, as working from home and, of course, increased flow of information digitally did speed up during the pandemic. Well, let's find out how this is working out for Kenya. We're joined by Billy Owino, CEO at TransUnion. Great to have you on the show with us, Mr. Owino. Now, as a credit analysis bureau, how significant has been the rise in digital payments and e-commerce transactions here in Kenya since the pandemic? And of course, what security challenges has these posed?
Yeah, thank you for having me once again. So we've seen actually quite a lot of movement towards, mobile money since the pandemic started in Kenya. I think if you look at the latest statistics, they show that there's been about a 27% rise in the use of mobile money on average. And I think as we are now getting to a phase where we are preparing for post-pandemic, a lot of focus is around moving a lot of transactions to a contactless environment. And also it's focused more around, trying to get as much as consumers as possible. For example, not coming to the bank, onboarding them digitally. And we see a lot of consumers and a lot of lenders starting to move into that space. Now, in terms of fraud, I think that's an area where we're starting to see an increase, because some of the defaults or the challenges that we're getting from the consumers and the lenders, is a lot of it now in terms of issues that they bring up whenever they're challenging their credit reports, is focused on issues that have to do with identity theft. So we are seeing that rising.
Well, in that case, are there any clear solutions, Mr. Owino, especially for financial institutions? What should they be deploying at this time in order to ensure that customers' digital transactions are safe?
I think with the rise in digitization, one thing that is very clear is that fraud is going to rise, because you're taking everything online. One of the recent reports that we've seen of late shows that during the pandemic, fraudsters have been setting up about 1,000 fraudulent websites on a daily basis. Yeah, so that's quite high. Huh? So as a lender or as anybody in the financial sector, one of the things that they need to do very well is to ensure that as they move toward a digital platform, one thing that they have to take care for is to really look at how do they onboard customers digitally, but how do they also verify them? And it's two scenarios. How do you verify that that person that you're dealing with is really who they claim they are in terms of identity? And then the second phase is how do you also ensure that that device that they're using, because most of it is going to be devices that either smartphones or laptops, is to really verify and ensure that the device that this person is using is not a device that has already been identified as fraudulent. And then, of course, the third piece to really check, what has been the activity of this customer consumer that you're bringing on board? Is there any data? So, for example, some of the data we have around credit activity, does it show that there's been a high velocity? Is somebody who's been this same profile moving from one lender to another trying to take a loan? Which could really point towards a stolen identity. And these fraudsters now trying to get into any platform to take facilities in someone's name.
Now, of course, you've been monitoring credit activity in Kenya for a while. As a credit bureau, what role are you playing to help with reducing fraud amongst businesses and, of course, lenders since this pandemic?
Yeah, so we've been actively involved in that space, and it's really, we took a two-pronged approach. One was to develop local solutions that are really unique to Kenya, mainly focusing on the digital space, the digital lending space, which has a lot of players, and really that's where Kenyans are going to when they want to take loans, for example, or small businesses. Yeah. Now, the solution that we have in that space really starts to look at Billy, for example, has gotten onto my platform today, but how many other digital lenders or platforms has it been on? What kind of facilities is it trying to take? Yeah. Now, this enables lenders to be able to have a view in terms of their decision making to look at, how risky am I? Yeah? So if I've been on 10 lenders today trying to take a loan the past, let's say 15 minutes or 1 hour, then that points to something. It could be me who's over indebted, trying to take that next facility, or it could be a fraudster who's stolen my identity and now trying to scam me. Yeah? And then the second thing that we've done is to really bring home a global solution that we've had called Aviation. And this really looks at the device. So it's got a huge database of about 5 billion devices, and it's really able to tell you as a lender at the point where this customer comes on board, be it online through a laptop or a smartphone, has there been any mysterious or fraudulent activities that is tied to that device? Yeah, is their location really where they say they are? And we see a lot of lenders who we work with in the digital space. One thing they're starting to see is that someone can be trying to take a facility on their digital platform, yet they're somewhere in the middle of DRC. We've seen some in the middle of Europe and trying to claim or mask their identity to say they're in Kenya. So these two solutions are really helping at this moment. And of course, the third piece is around ID verification, where we tap into our unique database, but also tap into the government database to be able to tell you, is Billy who they say they are? Does their ID match with what they're telling you? Are their serial numbers the same as what they're telling you? So that we avoid a scenario where somebody has come across maybe your name and ID number, and they can go ahead and scam you. But something like a serial number, they might not know. So we try to bring in all this data to try and build a 360-degree view of the consumer and help the lenders start to really build a very strong proposition and really have a look at who they're dealing with.
Quite interesting stuff. Well, many thanks for your insights, Mr. Owino. We do have to leave it there. That's Billy Owino. He is the CEO at TransUnion. Well, let's shift focus now over to Nigeria, where flooding has caused by severe rainfall in Kebbi State has damaged farmland and displaced thousands. Now, according to local news reports, over 500,000 hectares of rice farmland in the area was submerged. Kebbi is the country's main rice-growing state, according to the Rice Farmers Association of Nigeria. At least 50 people have died this year in Nigeria due to severe downpours. The country is the world's second-largest importer of grain and has now seen a 25% fall in production this year compared to projections. Meanwhile, tobacco sales in Zimbabwe are down almost 25% from last year as the crucial foreign currency generating industry feels the heat of last year's drought. Well, tobacco is Zimbabwe's second foreign currency earner after gold, with China and South Africa being the major buyers of the golden leaf. From Harare, here's Farai Mwakutuya with the rest of that report.
181 million kilograms were sold, down from 214 million the previous year, although the average price was up to $2.50 per kilogram from $1.99.
So the prices this year were very keen and very competitive, and farmers liked the price. But unfortunately, in terms of production, as I said earlier, we are down by about 25% from last year. The first reason that comes to mind is the drought. Last season was a dry season and production was down. And also another factor that contributed to this was that the monetary and financial systems in the country were changed, and farmers felt perhaps a little bit disadvantaged by the new systems. And as a result, they reduced their plantings and hectareages.
At the onset of sales, farmers were being paid at a fixed exchange rate, far below the one on the parallel market, at which prices of most inputs were being pegged. There have been significant developments on the currency front since the season began. A foreign currency auction system has come up with a more market-determined exchange rate that is giving fairer value to exporters, including the tobacco farmer. The changes have buoyed prospects for the coming season.
And this year, farmers were getting 50% of their net proceeds in foreign currency, in hard currency, and they were being availed with United States dollars in cash for this. And we think this will spur production. And we've seen it in terms of seed sales. Seed sales this year are as high as those that were achieved in 2018, just prior to the record crop of 259 million.
Any improvement in production is crucial for the entire economy.
There's a lot of employment creation downstream or in the value chain because of tobacco, right? You have got about 170,000 small-scale farmers that grow tobacco year in, year out, right? Then you also have got probably over 300,000 indirect jobs. It could be for transporters, financiers, insurers, cigarette manufacturers, processors. Zimbabwe has been generating foreign currency upwards of 850 million. So obviously, tobacco is a very key export commodity for Zimbabwe trade.
Indications from the meteorology department are that normal rains are expected this year, another boost for farmers as they prepare to take to the field again. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And now a look at our corporate headlines today. Nigeria has asked a Milan court to order Eni and Shell to pay just over $1 billion as an immediate advance payment for damages over the 2011 irregular acquisition of a Nigerian oil field. Now, the long-running bribery case revolves around the purchase of the OPL 254 offshore field for about $1.3 billion. Prosecutors allege that about $1.1 billion of the money was siphoned off to politicians and middlemen, including former Nigerian oil minister Dan Etete. And still in Nigeria, Zenith Bank expects its pre-tax profit to rise by 4% to 253 billion naira this year. Now, the bank achieved a profit of about 114.1 billion naira, or about $300 million in the first 6 months of this year. This is a 2.2% rise compared to the previous year. And the largest ever deal by a luxury goods company seems to be falling apart. France's LVMH says the threat of U.S. tariffs on French products has now forced it to scrap its planned $16.2 billion acquisition of Tiffany. Now, the United States announced in July that it would impose tariffs of 25% on French products, including makeup and handbags, as a part of a dispute over taxing digital companies. It, however, delayed collection of the tariffs until January 6, 2021. And finally, Uber says every vehicle on its global ride-hailing platform will be electric by 2040. The platform promised to contribute $800 million through 2025 to help drivers switch to battery-powered vehicles. This includes discounts for vehicles bought or leased from partner automakers such as Nissan and Renault. It clarified that the cost would be partially offset by an additional small fee charged to customers who request a green trip. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are heading into a short break now, still to come on the show. Business confidence in South Africa rises despite a 51% slump in output in the second quarter. And resumed flights inject optimism towards economic recovery in Nigeria.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Well, let's head to South Africa. The country's business confidence has recovered from an all-time low as coronavirus restrictions largely get lifted. Now, the Rand Merchant Bank Index, compiled by the Bureau for Economic Research, rose 24 points in the third quarter from 5 points in the second quarter. However, consumer sentiment remains relatively low in the country. The wholesale sector confidence rebounded the most, with recoveries in agriculture and international trade. On Tuesday, the country reported a 51% decline in economic output for the period between April and June. The business confidence figures could point to a possibility of a recovering economy after those lockdowns. Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced a raft of measures removing lockdown restrictions last month. Meanwhile, the Platinum Group metals remain important to the economic growth of the South African economy. These mines have been relatively unscathed in the pandemic lockdown, and they've been operating at near full capacity for the last 2 months. Well, CGTN's Angela Kupola looks at the sector.
The South African Platinum Group metals miners are adapting to the new normal and looking for solutions to an oversupply challenge.
The biggest issue that the industry faces right now remains COVID. So both in terms of our ability to operate safely and continue to produce, and equally how COVID impacts the global economies and ultimately the impact that has on our demand for our products.
We are in a very peculiar situation, unusual situation, in the sense that normally, that is in the old normal, you'd have factors affecting demand, not affecting supply, and factors affecting supply and at times impacting on demand.
Looking ahead, the next 2 years will be critical.
The uncertainty around demand will play out in the next 12 to 24 months. I think after that period, demand will stabilize at the sort of pre-COVID levels, or at least the new norm, whatever that might be. Given the potential changes of consumer behavior after this.
This will affect the commodity prices, and supply and demand pressures may lead to a rebalancing.
In the next 12 months, we're still going to see deficit in both palladium and rhodium in different degrees, and platinum more or less in balance. As at the least, we're going to see the market continue to be fairly in balance.
The big opportunity that's been waiting in the wings is the hydrogen economy.
And not only for hydrogen fuel cells, but for storage for renewables, the potential to export hydrogen from South Africa as a renewable hub through to Europe. We will be a big consumer of hydrogen in the future.
Government has a significant role to play in this new economy.
Hydrogen, particularly fuel cell cars, you need infrastructure. And that's where countries, governments have to come in, build infrastructure or allow infrastructure to be built.
The hydrogen economy has had some false starts in the past, but I think what we're seeing now is that we're at the cusp of hydrogen, becoming mainstream and growing and becoming potentially for us, a long-term future demand sector.
Everyone's talking about that new normal, that post-COVID-19 environment, and the PGM miners are hoping to be at the forefront to take advantage of any opportunities. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And heading to Nigeria now, the country has resumed international commercial flights following a 6-month shutdown caused by the outbreak of the coronavirus. Now, the resumption of flights is the latest measure taken by the government to reopen its economy. While CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam visited the capital's Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport and filed this report.
A celebratory atmosphere at the international airport in Abuja, Nigeria's capital. Once again, it bubbles with activities as travels resume. Africa's largest carrier, Ethiopian Airlines, is one of the first airlines to make its entry, taxiing onto the runway 6 months after the COVID-19 lockdown. But things are a lot different now, with more stringent health and safety protocols in place.
The queue outside is very long, and the social distance is really followed. They are really putting their game on it and trying to make sure the protocols are followed correctly. And I think it puts confidence in the traveler's mind, knowing that they are making efforts to make sure we are all safe.
Everything seems to be working well. They are taking caution. There is proper social distancing, and they make us to wash our hands and they sanitize our luggages.
This early phase of the resumption permits a maximum of 1,280 travelers arriving at the airport daily. That's about half of its original capacity. For now, the country's international airspace is not open to flights from all countries yet. 8 airlines, including Air France, Etihad, KLM and Lufthansa, have been denied access to Nigeria's international airspace. This move is in lieu of a ban on Nigerian tourists from entering some of those countries.
Ours is to accommodate and work with the airlines that are approved to come into our country. So far, no challenges. In fact, it's one of the most positive developments we've had since we resumed domestic. All our passengers have been working with us very well. Our protocols are working very efficiently, and we're very happy with that.
According to a report from the International Air Travel Association, IATA, Nigeria is the second African country worst hit by the restriction in commercial flights after South Africa. The nation lost about $78 million month on month in revenue during the COVID-19 induced closure of its international airports. Industry players, however, remain positive that reopening Nigeria's international airspace would bring the country closer to economic recovery. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break now, but still coming up. AstraZeneca puts on hold a late-stage trial of its highly anticipated COVID-19 vaccine. And the Rolling Stones' first flagship store opens up in London.
began holding guns, machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
At 1:30, let's recap other top stories. Heavy rains have been recorded across the Sahel region in the past week. This has led to devastating floods that have killed dozens and displaced thousands of people. They've also threatened to ruin historical sites and antiquities. The countries affected include Sudan, Niger, Nigeria, Chad, and Cameroon. And South African health officials believe the country has managed to control its COVID-19 surge. In the Western Cape of the country, which was the hardest hit region, some temporary hospitals have already been closed. But authorities there are also warning that it's too early to celebrate. And a peace accord has been slow in taking shape in South Sudan. When the peace deal was signed back in 2018, there were high hopes that it would bring years of bloodshed to an end. Well, a main component of the agreement was the formation of a new government, but 2 years on, this is yet to fully happen. And that is a recap of today's top headlines. And now some international news. British-Swedish multinational pharmaceutical AstraZeneca has put a hold on the late-stage trial of its highly anticipated COVID-19 vaccine. This is after a suspected serious adverse reaction in a study participant. Now, according to reports by a health website, Stat News, the suspension of this trial has had an impact on other AstraZeneca vaccine trials, as well as on clinical trials being conducted by other vaccine makers. It added that the nature of the safety issue and when it happened were not immediately known. The participant is expected to recover, but of course 9 leading US and European vaccine developers, including AstraZeneca, pledged to uphold scientific safety and efficacy despite the urgency to contain the coronavirus pandemic. Meanwhile, General Angel Gurria is warning that the global economy will lose 6% or even more this year because of the health crisis. Now, Gurria said during a press conference in Paris on Tuesday that the 6% drop is projected for just one wave of the pandemic. The loss will expand to 7.5% if there is a second wave of mass infections. Gurria's remarks were in line with an economic outlook report the OECD issued back in June. Now, the organization said unemployment amongst its member countries will climb to more than 9% this year from less than 3% in 2019. The organization also called for stronger international cooperation in order to help end the pandemic more swiftly. And the former Latvian Prime Minister Valdis Dombrovskis has officially taken off over the influential trade portfolio at the European Commission. He steps into the role at a difficult time for world trade as Europe tries to walk a fine balance between China and the United States.
As Europe comes to grips with the coronavirus pandemic, Brussels has been left to face a harsh economic reality. Its dependence, some would argue over-dependence, on the world's two superpowers, China and the United States. Charles Michel says that needs to change.
European strategic autonomy, I repeat, European strategic autonomy, these are not just words. The strategic independence of Europe is our new common project for this century.
China and the United States are Europe's top trading partners, but for Brussels, both have exposed vulnerabilities. In the U.S., an anti-globalization trade hawk sits in the White House. The Trump administration has slapped billions of dollars worth of tariffs on European goods since coming into power, igniting a trade war. And in China, shuttered factories during the height of the coronavirus pandemic disrupted vital supply chains into Europe, leading to calls for production to be brought closer to home.
Our industrial strategy will foster greater independence and make sure we have access to all the necessary resources to ensure the prosperity of our citizens. This includes, for instance, greater autonomy in producing processors, vital medicines, and other essential products.
Getting there won't come easy or cheap. The idea is to use the $2.1 trillion coronavirus recovery fund and long-term budget to help reposition the European economy, with a heavy focus on green initiatives and digitalization.
Despite calls for more independence, Brussels is right now in the midst of negotiations with both the U.S. and China, a series of mini deals with Washington to eliminate certain tariffs and avoid a further escalation in tensions, and also an investment deal with China to further open the mainland to European companies.
Advancing those talks now lands with Valdis Dombrovskis, who has been tabbed as the new EU Trade Commissioner, replacing Phil Hogan, who was forced to quit last month after breaching COVID-19 guidelines.
We are currently in turbulent waters as regards global trade, relations with US, relations with China. In case of China, indeed, we are working now and focusing on investment agreement. Of course, it would be great if we were able to conclude it this year, but there I would say substance before deadlines.
The incoming trade commissioner says imbalances in the EU-China trade relationship need to be worked out before a deal can be signed. The appointment of one of the EU's top economic policymakers highlights Brussels' commitment to get the job done, both with China and the United States. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Brussels.
Now, Amazon founder and CEO Jeff Bezos has for the third year in a row topped the Forbes list of richest Americans. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump's ranking dropped to 352 from the previous 275 as the coronavirus pandemic crippled his business ventures. The aggregate wealth of the Forbes 400 list rose to a record $3.2 trillion as the richest Americans continue to do well through the pandemic. Eric Yuan, Chief Executive Officer of Zoom Video Communications, was one of the 18 newcomers on the list with a net worth of $11 billion. Now, other newcomers on the Forbes 400 list include Jim Koch. He is the co-founder of the Boston Beer Company, and Trevor Milton, who is the founder of Nikola.
You know, the people who control the most wealth, they have a lot of power, right? I mean, if you think about, you know, the eyeballs watching Netflix, the people shopping on Amazon, the people shopping at Walmart, the people using Microsoft products, the people on Twitter, the people using, you know, Square, all of those fortunes, right, were built by people on the Forbes 400 list. As a society, I think we all should know who is behind the biggest companies and what they're doing with their money and how those companies are operating.
Well, let's head to China now. The 6-day International Fair for Trade in Services has come to a close in Beijing. Government officials and global business leaders say it's just the beginning for more opening up and cooperation. Here's CGTN Sonia with more.
It's China's first major trade event since the pandemic began, and all eyes are on the results.
We are seeing positive results despite the pandemic and a volatile world economy. This serves as a window of opportunity. It expresses our willingness to open up and sends a positive signal for globalization and cooperation. China is willing to work with other countries to create an open and inclusive environment.
There have been bright themes, rich content, and fruitful results from the 190 forum discussions.
It's amazing to see how we've bounced back. That is to say, in terms of the show itself and Canadian communities, the Canadian companies' response, I think that, at this point, the Canadian economy is roughly 70% services oriented. So a show based on services is very exciting for us. We excel in areas like healthcare and education and financial services. So those particular companies are doing quite well.
Chinese capital Beijing said it would take a lead in opening up the service sector, establishing the country's first free trade zone for scientific innovation and the digital economy. China's financial regulator promised more opening up and a consistent and transparent policy environment. Commerce departments, international businesses, and top think tankers had come together to create a network for better cooperation.
There is a need now to have this kind of inter-chamber activities and inter-chamber collaborations. And we find that actually chamber plays huge roles, and they particularly during this tension and also turbulent times.
International chamber, or a chamber of chambers per se, is a very strong idea, and I think that we're always better united than we are apart.
At the opening of CITES, Chinese President Xi Jinping promised that China would step up opening up and work more with the world for shared prosperity. And as the fair closes, China's Commerce Ministry says it's already working on a range of endeavors, including a negative list for cross-border services in trade, promising the release of it by the end of this year. And participants here say they believe the efforts are already starting to show. Sun Ye, CGTN, Beijing.
Now, the Rolling Stones' first flagship store, which is called the RS No. 9 Carnaby, has finally opened in London. Despite the coronavirus pandemic and the downturn in retail, the renowned music band has decided to go ahead with the launch.
September the 9th is another big day for the Rolling Stones, not for music this time, but for its first flagship store. As well as selling clothing, merchandise, and music, it offers visitors what it calls an experiential experience.
It's a bit of a journey, makes it a super sort of exciting moment for them to come into the store. So just to highlight maybe a few things, you've got the oversized tongue lips, which is great for an Instagram moment. And over here, we've got the amazing sculpture of Paint It Black, the first few verses of the Stones' classic song.
The store contains items from new fashion label RS No. 9 Carnaby. Attractions include a video wall showing a film of the band, as well as a sound wave installation representing part of the 1960s track Paint It Black. There are also Rolling Stones masks for sale too, a reminder of the current global health crisis. Boeing is hopeful the store will give a real boost to the retail landscape.
I think at a time then obviously retail has been a little bit challenged. To take a store like this to the marketplace, I think is a really powerful and exciting message.
Speaking about the venture, the Stones' lead singer Mick Jagger said he was optimistic about the store's future.
People will be curious, and people are out and about a bit more than they were. There won't be so many tourists. Obviously, the tourist trade is big in that part of London, but there won't be so much of that this year. But through into next year, we'll see. We hope that things will change and things will improve.
Jagger said he also hopes the store will be a nice place to just hang out. CGTN.
Now in China, a 90-year-old woman is garnering some fame among millennials for sharing her life stories on social media. She has gained thousands of followers in only just a few months. Well, CGTN's Li Sirui has more.
Unlike her elderly peers, who mostly abstained from the mainstream world and pop culture, Minzi has found a following online. becoming an influencer for China's younger generations.
大家好，今天我给大家
With the help of her grandson, Minzi adopted the new hobby at home, videotaping and uploading her life stories on the internet. Only 3 months after her first few posts, Minzi gained nearly 300,000 followers. The video platform gave her an award for her outstanding performance.
一种什么形式？
I've always wanted to document my life in some way. I'm not saying they are special, but I think my life stories reflect the changes in this country. I don't remember how to write many words, but I can tell stories, so making videos suits me well.
So far, Minzi has told stories about how she got out of an arranged marriage and overcame obstacles to become a railroad engineer at the dawn of New China, when old ways of thinking clashed with hopes for a new world. Although Minzi's tale highlights things of a bygone era, her vivid descriptions have touched and inspired a generation 70 years younger. But this influence could not be achieved without the help of her grandson. Not only did he help her with the video editing, but also the content planning for each episode.
因为也是第一次嘛，跟别人来磨合。
This is the first time I've worked with anyone else. Also, there's a generation gap between my grandma and me. Sometimes what she says cannot be translated technically. Sometimes my work is not what she wants. But after a few rounds of adjusting, we understand each other better and we can make better videos.
Minzi says she will keep on making more videos. She also says she will improve her video editing skills, hoping to one day make videos without the help of her grandson. Lucy Ray, CGTN, Guangzhou.
Well, let's move on now and take a look at how commodity markets performed today. Oil futures clawing back some of the losses they sustained in the previous session. But of course, a rebound in COVID-19 cases in some countries did undermine hopes for a steady recovery in global demand. Meanwhile, gold prices slipping as the dollar rose to multi-week highs ahead of monetary policy strategies from major central banks in North America and, of course, Europe. Gold, of course, continues to edge lower as the US dollars continues to strengthen. Well, let's take a short break now. Still to come. Young people in Ghana turn to farming as their preferred white-collar jobs.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Now, Ethiopia is planning to sell a 5% stake in its state-run telecom firm to its citizens, and that's all part of measures to break up its monopoly. Now, the privatization of the telco is part of Ethiopia's plans to open up one of the world's last closed telecoms markets in the nation of around 110 million people. From Addis Ababa, here's CGTN's Girum Chala with more details.
Ethiopia's plan to sell shares of the country's giant telecom enterprise to the public has been envisioned since Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed took the top job some 2.5 years ago. The reformist Prime Minister has been reiterating expanding the telecom service coverage nationwide as one of his key priorities on his agenda.
The telecom services coverage in the country must be increased. To do that, the government has no capacity as the investment is too high. This is a country with no communication satellite under its possession. The fiber line is also too expensive. To cover all these expenses, it's critically important that we invite giant investors.
According to the plan, the government will retain a 55% stake in the state-run Ethio Telecom, 40% going to international companies, and the remaining 5% will be sold to the Ethiopian public. Also, 2 more operators who will provide telecom service alongside Ethio Telecom will start work soon.
at the highest level. As a government, we have agreed on what is the minimum we should expect out of this sale. With this in mind, we are completing the documents and making the necessary preparations. Once fully decided, we will announce the bid by mid-September.
Some sections of the public have, however, criticized Ethiopia's government for failing for foreign and lobbyist pressure while making decisions to sell shares of the country's telecom monopoly. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, however, disagrees.
This is a government that will work on its own decisions, not because it's told what to do. This is not a government that executes a certain duty just because we are ordered. For evidence, there is the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. At the dam project, the government said no to foreign pressure. We have prioritized our national interest, so we won't do anything different for the telecom sector.
Already, the Ethiopian public is eager to take part in the shares purchase process, which will lead to the ownership of Ethio Telecom. The government too has promised to keep the process as smooth and transparent as possible. Group Data CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Now, in Ghana, the coronavirus pandemic has reinforced the importance of agriculture as a sustainable employment opportunity, especially for young people in the country. While thousands have lost their jobs due to the shocks caused by the pandemic, some young Ghanaians are now turning to farming in order to earn a living. Here's CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reporting from Accra.
Perry Edunyame started this farm in June, just a few months after the coronavirus pandemic hit Ghana. 20 acres of maize is almost ready for harvest.
COVID-19 really exposed the fact that, food security is always a major concern for every community or every country. And when we realized that, importation and exportation were becoming a problem, we needed to think of how we're going to survive on our own. So a lot of the state institutions started raising conversations on agriculture and food production and everything. And we realized that it is important for us to get into food production.
Farming has not always been Perry's desired occupation. Like many Ghanaian young people, he's also pursued white-collar employment but could not secure a sustainable job. Ghana's Statistical Service says 42,000 people lost their jobs due to the coronavirus outbreak since March.
The only field of work that can never be stopped is agriculture. Reason being, no matter what happens, people need to eat.
And it's not just Perry who's seen an opportunity in farming. 19 young people are employed on this farm.
Perry says there is a need for investment in skills development to attract more young people into agriculture. And by engaging them in farming, he hopes unemployment rate in Ghana can be reduced.
Ghana's unemployment rate is projected to hit 7.3% by the end of this year. The government says it is engaging 60,000 young people in its Planting for Food and Jobs program and hopes to make farming more attractive to younger workers. Still, some farmers say more needs to be done.
The only thing the government should do is that it should put a policy in place and also find some land for them to try them and see. Anyone who is interested, okay, they give him the go-ahead, they give him the necessary supports.
While COVID-19 has pushed some Ghanaian young people into farming, many now hope to make agriculture a full-time job, with ambitions of feeding Ghana, but also growing enough produce to export abroad. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Meanwhile, in South Africa, Roadhouse-style drive-in cinemas are making a comeback decades after their peak popularity in the 1960s and 70s. Now, the entertainment industry in the country took a huge hit during the COVID-19 pandemic. Event companies and restaurants are now scrambling to make up for what has been lost, and for some, drive-ins may be the answer. Here's CGTN's Judy Shire with that report.
Restrictions on entertainment and socializing during the COVID-19 pandemic has kept many at home and forced food and entertainment companies to rethink their strategies. But it's also helped revive an old craze.
We're looking for opportunities to monetize parking spaces, which were obviously very empty and no one was generating income out of them. So we actually borrowed the concept from the States, where we saw that there were a lot of companies sort of popping up everywhere, running drive-in cinemas.
We had to come up with new and exciting ways to make money and sort of keep our brand alive. And we partnered up with, we called the Filthy Moustache. We partnered up with Park Up and Africa Sky Cinema. And yeah, we brought the concept alive and we're super excited to see where we'll go with it.
Just over $10 gets you a hearty Roadhouse meal and popcorn to munch on while enjoying an old classic in your car.
We're sticking to the classic, old school, nostalgia vibe. So the first dry run, we actually did Pretty Woman, and we've sort of been keeping to that theme as well. Last night we had The Wedding Singer. Today we're having Monsters Inc. and we had Lion King. Just sort of like those old movies that make you feel something.
It's a lovely spring evening in Johannesburg. These drive-ins are becoming more popular, with people wanting to get out for a fun evening as South Africa's long lockdown continues.
Lockdown has been, whilst necessary, been incredibly tough from a mental perspective. Being stuck in the house, feeling trapped, feeling caged has been really hard. And evenings like this is incredible because you feel it's just open sky and you get to enjoy the vibe and just be with other people and be with your family and do something different that isn't sitting in front of your TV or in front of a Zoom meeting.
You feel safe, you feel you can control your hygiene standards because you are not in a public place as such. So it also reminded me of old school vibes. When I was young, I was studying in Durban, we used to do drive-in movies. So I thought it's an experience I wouldn't like my kids to miss, and I'd like to expose them to it.
Since launching a few weeks ago, this venue in Johannesburg has sold out, and it's just a matter of time before the rest of the country catches on. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, before we go, here's a quick look at Africa's currencies today. South Africa's rand on track to break a two-day losing streak, recovering from the previous session sell-off after data showed that South Africa's economic collapse in the second quarter was worse than expected. Now, the currency was volatile earlier, weakening to as much as 17 rand per dollar, but it has found some resistance at this level. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.